Chat, welcome back. It is day 2 of 11th edition 40k spoiler season. We had an insane amount of new information come out in the last 24 hours between the update article, the preview article that we talked about yesterday that talked about list composition. We also had the tournament organizer call with the Games Workshop events team and discussing what new missions and terrain layouts will look like in 11th edition. I released a video on that this morning at like 2 a.m. So please go check that out. If you want more information about that, that's going to add a lot of context to what we talk about today, which is mission design. And I, for one, would like to welcome Warhammer 40,000, the sci-fi miniatures game, into the 21st century, because we finally have asymmetric missions in 40k and actually incorporated into the core design as sort of a design tenet, not something that's just sort of like randomly thrown in there as a funny gag that you can do. A lot of games have been moving this way because it's more interesting, and if not like purely asymmetric missions, at least missions that are player controlled, and that seems to be how these rules are working. So it seems pretty cool. We'll see how it goes. Need to know what kind of terrain you need to buy. Yeah, I think that it sounds like what they're saying is that most of the terrain that you have already is going to be compatible. What you might need to do is add more, because according to the participants that I've discussed with that were in the tournament organizer call, the new number is 16. 16 terrain features per table, mirrored 8 per player side. So terrain is mirrored. Missions are not mirrored, which I understand. You don't want to like force people to set up terrain over and over and over again, which makes sense. But it sounds like there's going to be a lot more like smaller pieces that are blind sight blocking and big like weird shapes, which I think is going to be interesting. But if you already have the existing like chapter proof 2025 tournament kit and you have terrain for that, that should be compatible. You may just need to add on top of it, which I'm sure everyone's excited about. We'll see. All right, let's talk about this article because it looks super cool. In earlier mission packs, the way you built your army had no impact on the missions the game asked you to complete. In fact, sometimes it did, but that was entirely player controlled. Hot diggity damn! Marcus Losh with the 5 gifted memberships. Congratulations to everybody who just got a membership there. Those being GL Hiffic, Glihific, Azuma Kazuma, Brand T Drake, Seizure James, and someone else, I'm sure, but the YouTube doesn't want to tell me who. I don't know, but thank you so much for the memberships. I appreciate that, bud. In any case, let's keep going. Let's talk about it. So you had a little bit of control over missions in previous editions, because you would either be able to select your fixed objectives, or in 9th edition you would just select your secondary objectives entirely. But obviously, like that wasn't sort of mechanically informed by your army composition. That was just a decision that you made at the time. So a little bit different. Core Berserkers might inexplicably race to stand on objectives in the corners of the battlefield. Tough fire warriors find themselves assaulting entrenched melee units to secure a few extra victory points. The new missions encourage you to complete all sorts of objectives your army would naturally pursue. When you build your army, I find this a little bit, I don't know. It's a little trite, in my opinion, to say like, oh, it doesn't make sense for Khorne Berserker to go and stand on the circle. But like the circle could represent a lot of stuff, right? And that's typically how they theme it in the rules. But I understand how people would maybe not necessarily want to play that way. When you build your army, your detachments each unlock a different force disposition, one of which you will choose to represent your army's force disposition for each battle. Yeah. So what they said in the previous article is that you chose on list building. It wouldn't be in selection when you got to a matchup. I sort of wish you could select it, but it might be just a lot of information. Might give you more control than they want to over the mission that you're playing. However, you'll determine the manner in which you achieve that mission based on the real battlefield conditions on the ground. By comparing your chosen force disposition to your opponents at the start of the battle, you'll find out the specific details of the mission you'll be playing. This is all information that we got yesterday. However, what we have received is more details about how exactly that works. What it seems like you will do is have a hand of 5 cards for each of these force dispositions that correspond to, or I guess 4 cards, that corresponds to the other force dispositions. So if you say, I built my detachments and one of my detachments allows me to play reconnaissance, I get a card that says priority assets, purge the foe, disruption, and take and hold. And when I get to a table to play my opponent and they say, I'm playing purge the foe, you take the purge the foe card out of your reconnaissance deck, and that is the mission that you are attempting to play, which is how your missions are asymmetric. You and your opponent may have different interactions based on the exact force disposition that you've chosen. However, the actual mechanics of how that scores is informed by what your opponent's force disposition is. I guess it could be mirror match. You're right, chat. It should be 5. You are correct. That's true. And they give us some examples. Each force disposition is geared towards thematic mission objectives. So an army choosing Purge the Foe will score victory points for wiping out enemy units, while one opting for Disruption may need to perform actions in enemy territory or while occupying crucial areas of terrain. While missions are designed to create a narrative in every game, they're really pushing this. They're pushing this Forge the Narrative angle so hard. They're like, guys, we swear we're not just a tournament game. I swear it. I swear. They're still tightly balanced around each other, asymmetrical in nature, but still fair, telling an authentic Warhammer story between 2 well-matched forces. This is a little interesting to me because it's like, I get the angle, but at the end of the day, when you are trying to enforce balance and game mechanics, I'm going to soapbox for a moment here. When you're trying to enforce balance and sort of like workable game mechanics, you're by its very nature, the game will veer from a purely narrative experience. And so I think there's something to be said for divorcing like the two notions. Not necessarily that like I think all games should be standing on circles, but I think like, this you may have to theme the circles or something like that. I do think that to some extent this narrative, no pun intended, that they're saying, oh, the missions are very narrative, we swear, is not necessarily the case. When you're talking about a narrative mission, like what you want to do is like talk about your guys, like moving to secure a relic and there being, some sort of terrain involved where that is standing in a mechanic by which you pick up the relic and move it, or you are, trying to upload a technovirus into a computer system. And so you have to find the computer system on the table or something like that. That's what people want when they talk about narrative play. They don't want themed tournament play. So I understand this discussion, but I think if you are a purely narrative player, you will probably still find these missions lacking. However, I do not think that a push towards more narratively inspired objectives is bad. I think it is, in fact, good. As long as the objectives are written and balanced appropriately, having the objectives be narrative further immerses you even when you're playing competitive play, and it just makes the game more interesting and fun. So I do understand that stand on circle is not interesting, and so I hope that these missions are going to be a little bit more digestible for a lot of people. It's forced narrative for competitive play. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's, in fact, the opposite. I think that it is forced competitive play for narrative players is how it's going to end up being. Because I don't believe in I don't think that you can fit on a standard playing card size play, area, the number of unique mechanics and special things to make a truly narrative mission work. And nor would I necessarily think you want to. And I also don't think that that's going to be particularly well balanced, which is what you want for tournament play. So going by this like continuously harping on this like constructed narrative in order to buy casual or narrative players into this, like what is essentially going to be a competitive mission format, I think is just doing them a disservice. And speaking as someone who is on the beneficial side of this, right? Somebody who essentially only interacts with the game in a competitive manner. This, I don't know. It feels weird to me, but I understand
6,931 donated $2 through Super Chat. Would the better word be thematic than narrative?
That's a great point. I think thematic is a great that's a great word to use there. Yeah, I don't know like if you're necessarily telling a story, but it definitely I think is gonna invest you a little bit more or immerse you a little bit more in the universe. So I think that's fine. All right, let's talk about some missions. So this is an example of the card that we are talking about. Punishment, the primary mission. You are playing Purge the Foe. You are playing against Disruption. If I zoom in, is this going to freak out? What if I open it in a new tab? Does that look okay? Oh, yeah, that looks great. At the start of your turn, select 1 to 3 enemy units that are on the battlefield and within range of objectives that or that destroyed one or more friendly units of the previous turn. If you cannot select one enemy unit that is on the battlefield until the start of your next turn, those units are condemned. In any battle round at the end of a turn, if one or more condemned enemy units left the battlefield, this just gives you marked for death as a primary mission. Incredible. Then you gain 5 victory points. At the end, from the second battle round onwards, at the end of your command phase, if you control one or more objectives, excluding your home, you score 4 victory points. If you control more objectives than your opponent, then you control 5. You score 5. And at the end of the battle, you get 8 victory points if you control your opponent's home objective. Oof, brutal. End of battle scoring. That's interesting that it seems like they are doing away with explicit second player advantage for implicit second player advantage, where this becomes incredibly easy to do if you're second player.
6,931 donated $10 through Super Chat. For example, if you're playing the Orc Commander detachment, you actually get to do stealthy things like disruption.
I think that's the idea. It sounds like these are themes on a primary mission or primary objective control rather than like transformations. So I imagine that, for example, I don't know if they have any disruption primary. Oh, they do. Okay, we'll talk about the disruption primary in a second, or one of them, I guess, one of the 5. But I imagine that is essentially how things are going to be. So you select 3. So either enemy units can become condemned themselves by destroying your units or by controlling objectives. And otherwise, you can select one enemy unit on the battlefield. It's a little interesting because so it's 1 to 3 enemy units that are on the battlefield and within range of objectives and or the destroy one more friendly units the previous turn. So you can actually make this more difficult to score as the opposing player by doing normal things. When you are fighting your opponent, this primary is actually worse for them, which I actually kind of like, because if my units are destroying your units, you must select them as your condemned target. If I don't interact with the objective at all, then you get to choose anyone, right? So like if I have a utility unit sitting in your home, like in your backline doing established locus or some shit, but I have no one else, in range of objectives, I guess. It seems extremely difficult if there are home objectives. Obviously, we have to see what the layouts look like. It could be that all objectives are midboard. I don't know. But if I assume that there are home objectives. If there are home objectives and I'm just holding my home objective, then you must choose that to be one of your punishment your condemned targets. However, if I'm holding no objectives, you can choose anyone. So as I'm like pushing forward and taking objectives, it restricts who you could choose to be condemned. The condemned destruction basically it puts a pretty heavy emphasis on killing that one unit. Because if you don't, you just lose 5 victory points around.
At Bonesaurus Reedy 926 donated $5 through Super Chat. My only concern is it looks like they haven't empowered going second based on the missions shown.
Bonesaur, thank you for the super chat. I think I agree so far. Obviously, there's a lot of there's like a million things we don't know, right? Terrain layouts may be a big thing. It could be that just like with the larger emphasis on defense, you're able to stage harder, so there's more of a tempo play with going first. But if end of battle scoring is going to be on every single mission, I am a little bit worried about that for sure. This, in a lot of cases, if you're just playing really aggressively and pushing forward every game, this is just going to be 8 victory points for going second, where if you're going first, it's going to be my opponent just like held 10 OC back, and then I guess there must be a home objective because it says home objective. I don't know why I was like questioning that. It's literally described on the card. But like my opponent, held 10, like objects their home, pushed back, and then held 10 OC. I took their home objective and they took it back, and I lost 8 victory points. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how things end up. I hope that they do something to offset the first versus second, because I'm a little bit worried as well that the danger of going first or second in 10th edition, which is you could choose to deploy on the line and play more aggressively in order to take the risk that your opponent would go first and kill you. With the new concealment rules, where units are able to enter terrain and then become like a 15-inch lone operative sort of effect. If that works at the beginning of the game, I would be a little bit worried that you do have the opportunity to deploy very aggressively as the first, or in either case, and then the first player doesn't get the opportunity to punish that.
At Ryong 6,931 donated $2 through Super Chat. Episode 11th, The Cigarette Strikes Back.
No, not the cigarette. No, never. For those who don't get the context of the cigarette jokes, we played a game that used it it was like 2 years ago. But I was playing Thousand Suns and I built this silly list. It was like all monsters. And we played a game that was on like the Texas tournament circuit. In an event like the Texas tournament circuit terrain layouts. And one of them had this huge fucking ziggurat in the middle. It was like this stepped pyramid with like ruined walls on the top. So if you were like bigger than a 40 mil or 50 mil base, you couldn't take the middle objective. And so I looked down at like Magnus and 3 Forge Beasts and 3 Mutilate Vortex Beasts. I'm like, I guess I'll go fuck myself. And then a Minister and Priest survived with that objective against Magnus shooting him for 2 turns. And that was mostly it. I think it was not the worst game ever if that wasn't the case. Pretty wild what we do with the ziggurat now. It is the objective. That's the only objective that matters, is the big ziggurat. All right. So let's talk about some other stuff. We can talk about the reverse, a disruption primary mission. Unless you both pick the same force disposition, you and your opponent will have different primary objectives, creating a fun tactical challenge that writes its own story. You're not just shooting some orcs to pieces, you're stopping some sneaky blood axes from booby-trapping your frontline fortifications. We love to see it. Let's take a peek at how that looks. Speaking of orcs and sneaky freebooters, in any battle round. So here's the thing, is that a lot of these have turn 1 scoring available, which is actually pretty wild. Obviously, it's a little difficult because like the one we discussed previously, right, this punishment one, you have to kill a unit top of 1, which your opponent kind of has control over, and they know what your primary is. So you're not going to put your Space Marine scouts out in the middle of the table if you know your opponent can score 5 victory points on them on the top of the first turn. Although I guess you can probably play around that by just putting your models on your home objective so that they have to choose them for punishment. This is what actually seems like it is fairly controllable, at least in round 1. I'd be interested to see exactly how powerful that mission ends up being. But in any case, we can talk about Death Tramp. In any battle round at the end of your turn, you get 2 victory points for each terrain area trapped. You also get an additional 3 victory points for each of those areas that is an objective, to no cap. I hope that there is a limit on the number of primary we can score in a turn. We'll see. That requires an action, an objective action, starting in your shooting phase, one friendly unit within range of one objective, excluding your home, or within a terrain area that is not within your deployment zone that you have not yet trapped. So you can't trap your deployment zone stuff, but I mean, real talk, we're gonna have a bunch of Space Marine scouts and a bunch of commandos and stuff in the middle of the table doing trap actions. There's a use limit section for actions. We love to see it. Very clean. Each unit that starts this action this phase must be within a different terrain area. It completes immediately. The area terrain is trapped. So this is scoreable from the beginning of the game outside your deployment zone, but only once per terrain area. So there is a limit on the number of times that you can score this, like, all told. This does feel like it is kind of has huge benefits going first, because you're able to trap the midboard without your opponent, like, fucking with you. I imagine that this is great going first, in fact. We're basically like, oh, there's like 2 or 3 terrain objectives in the center of the table. I'm just going to score like a 19-point turn 1. And now I don't have to do my primary mission action for the rest of the game. At the end of the battle round, if one or more enemy units that started the turn within a terrain area was destroyed, if that area was trapped, you gain 3 victory points. From second battle round onwards, if you control one or more objectives, you gain 4 victory points. So what you really want to do is forward operate. Fortunately, this is uninteractable, right? All you need to do is get a model to a terrain feature, and then you just do it. You don't have to like out-OC people. You don't have to do anything else. You just have to drop the traps in. It means that you can't trap an objective and then kill someone that was on it to get points. But it does feel like this is in a lot of cases going to be very controllable. Probably more so than the punishment one. This one feels like you probably won't score at turn 1, but as your opponent's moving up to do things, they're going to be doing it later. This one feels like if you are going second, your opponent can make it extremely punishing for you to complete the secondary. But I guess in a lot of cases, when you are in a terrain feature and trapping it, in order for your opponent to kill you, they have to move into that terrain feature too. In most cases, maybe not all. So maybe you'll just be able to like trap an objective for 2 and then kill the unit that killed you for 3 more, and maybe that's fine. But you are giving up a lot of like utility units to complete the primary. Interesting. That's fascinating. Maybe there's a go first priority list. Ooh, that would be cool. There is no way to untrap it. As soon as you do the thing, you get the points all game. No. You get the points and then you don't score them again. The end of battle round trigger checks for each area terrain that you trapped this turn. It doesn't check for each area terrain that is trapped. It's not like Terraform. So once you've trapped objective, you score the 2 to 5 victory points, and then you won't score that terrain feature ever again. You will only check to see if enemies are in it and you kill them. Yeah. If it was like Terraform, this would be nuts. If you just unlocked passive income for the rest of the game. But fortunately, it is a 1-turn score. This is interesting. This I mean, obviously depends entirely on how the terrain layouts go. And a lot of the rumors we've been talking about have been discussing that the game doesn't really work if you don't use the recommended terrain layouts. And I'm sort of seeing that because the terrain becomes not just objectives in that terrain layouts are objective markers, or terrain templates are objective markers in a lot of cases, in that the terrain itself becomes relevant for objectives. So if you're like setting up terrain at your local game store and you're like, oh, we put 5 pieces of terrain down, but the missions are balanced around 16 pieces of terrain, you suddenly, like, this objective becomes unplayable, right? And unfortunately, you don't really have control over whether or not you play it, because you don't know what the setup looks like when you get before you get to the table. So we will see. We'll see how it goes. I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. Action caps at 30 if 12 terrain pieces are out of your deployment zone. If that's the case, it's probably that, like, I guess 25% in your deployment zone makes a lot of sense. So that's probably going to be around the case. Although, like, whether or not you're going to be completing 12 actions over the course of the game, many of which are in your opponent's deployment zone? I don't 100% know. But it does speak to forced composition a little bit. If you're playing this, you are way more incentivized to play deep strike utility units, right? I'm playing flesh hounds. I'm playing screamers. I'm playing jump pack intercessors. I'm playing fucking starfangs, dude. We're running little idiots everywhere to go to just go do these missions on turn 1 or turn 2. I don't know. It's pretty interesting. I think it's gonna be interesting. If you are trapping it, at least requires a unit to kind of do nothing on top of normal secondaries. Yeah, that is going to be a restriction. But we'll see what the secondary lit deck looks like. It could be that action secondaries are significantly reduced. And it's more about like terrain control. I don't know. Moving on. In pickup games, you can choose a different force disposition ahead of each battle. Oh, okay, fair enough, I guess. In a tournament setting, you'll usually lock your force disposition for the event when you submit your list. Since each force disposition has 5 distinct missions, one for each other force disposition, you can therefore control the level of complexity in terms of what mission roles and combinations you need to learn. I think it would be cool if it was a blind selection at the start of each game. If you come up to a thing and you say, I have purged a disruption, and your opponent says, I have taken hold, I forget what all the names are. I have taken hold priority assets and reconnaissance, and you go, what could they take? What is their list looks like it wants to complete? I think that would be sick. That would be something I think as we are getting accustomed to the new mechanics, I think would be very complicated. And a lot of times you would just pick whatever you want. But that could be something that in a year or two down the road, they open up for competitive play. And I think would be absolutely sick. As someone who is such an advocate for player agency in games, being able to select those at the fly would be super cool.
At Peaches the Destroyer 483 donated $5 through Super Chat. New hopeful drop. Lucas the Trikester comes back as an actual model and scouts blood claws and
he's
gets bonus to traps because he's the greatest troll ever.
That would be sick. It would be cool if... I mean, I'm always into mechanics that like mesh in with each other. It would be cool if there were units or characters that had different abilities based on your force disposition. Could you imagine that? That would be so cool. You're like, all right, my like Stern Guard veterans, I've chosen Purge the Foe, so they gain... I don't know, reroll ones to hit, or if I've taken hold, they get like bonus save when they're in cover or something, right? Because like either like they're mission oriented, they're either very good at shooting people, they're disciplined shooters, or they're ready to take objectives. I'm sure that will be. Well, I'm not sure. I hope, and I think it would be neat if that was a piece of game design that they elected to use in the future. It is a little bit of the downside of not indexing new additions, because when you come up with these interesting new mechanics, you don't give yourself the opportunity to build off of them until you release new codexes, which is, I don't know, less exciting. But that would be really cool. I think that'd be super sick. All right. Deployment cards will be familiar to existing players, featuring classic setups such as Dawn of War, Hammer and Anvil, and Tipping Point. Each mission pairing also has 3 recommended terrain layouts using specific deployments designed to give both players a balanced battlefield to fight through. Although you're always free to come up with your own to match your own terrain collection. Secondary objectives. I want to see what this looks like. Because they keep talking about each mission pairing has 3 recommended terrain layouts, but they don't talk about like, are those terrain layouts common among different pairings? I imagine they are. I can't imagine that there's more than, 6 or 8 individual terrain setups, especially because they have to set up around the different deployment zones. But there could be like 50, which would be too many, I think. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Secondary objective is return in much the same way as they are in the current edition, allowing players to choose either fixed or tactical objectives, stick with their favorites, or draw cards from a deck for a chance at higher scoring. There's one big change, though. This was talked about by many of the tournament organizers from their chat with the events team. Instead of having only 2 at any given time, you'll now draw 2 objectives every turn and keep hold of the ones you haven't scored yet. So no need to worry about an early draw scuppering your late game plans. So it sounds like it's worth noting that primary mission cap is a total of 45 victory points per game, and a cap of 15 victory points per battle round. There we go. We found it. That's good. So they just don't have to write that. That's just in the core rules. So there is interesting. If we go back to the trap mission, there is a legitimate reason to not trap objectives, because your primary mission is only scoreable up to 15 per battle round. So if I go, it's battle round 2, I'm going to score 4 for this, and I'm going to score 3 for this. If I trap more than 4 terrain features or 2 terrain features if they're objectives, I lose victory points. I lose total victory point score for the entire game. So this is definitely something you want to do on turn 1 when these are are either not in play or probably not in play. In fact, basically it's impossible to score this turn 1 because you have to start in a trapped area, which you can't do. You have an enemy unit has to start your turn in a trapped area, which you can't have on turn 1. So because you have to perform the action on turn 1. So these are literally just scoreable second battle round onwards. So you can trap a million times turn 1 to get the big 15, right? If we score like 2 terrain objectives and 3 other terrain features, then we get our 15 turn 1, and we don't have to worry about it quite as much for the rest of the game. I think that's the intended play pattern. Good to know. 45 victory points per game, a cap of 15 victory points per battle round. Same with secondary missions. That means there's 10 point. That means there's 10 points for battle ready painting, chat. No, it's back. I can't believe it. Why? Why are we like this? Excuse me, I don't think your models are based victory points. So you can't wait to try and score everything right at the end. Finally, twists also return as an optional mechanic. They can modify core rules or introduce unexpected challenges. One allows all units to move through terrain like nimble infantry. Holy shit. While another causes both players to completely swap primary objectives. That's hilarious. That's super duper funny. In addition, there's another mystery deck we'll talk about. Cool. Oh, I'm excited. There's even an optional twist mirrored world where you both use the same primary.
Beyond 6,931 donated $2 through Super Chat. Sounds like you're setting up traps ahead of time.
Indeed. Infiltrators can start in a trap terrain area. They cannot. Because you have to perform the action for the terrain area to become trapped. So because no terrain areas are trapped at the start of your turn, if you go first and kill models in an area that you then trap, it doesn't count because they didn't start in the trapped area, right? Oh, I guess maybe it does. Actually, now I'm reading it again. No, you might be right, actually, chat. If one of our enemy units that started a turn it's not within a trapped terrain area are destroyed, it checks whether the terrain area is trapped at the end. No, I think you are right. If you do infiltrate into a terrain area, you perform the action on that terrain and then kill the unit, you could score that. No, I think you're correct. So there is a thin line of play where you can score that turn 1. But again, like your opponent knows you're going to do that, so they're probably not going to deploy in the objectives that you can get to or in the terrain features you could get to. Yeah, I agree with you. You're right. I'm wrong. Makes sense. Cool. There is a pregame sequence example. You muster armies, determine mission, determine deployment, create the battlefield, determine attacker and defender. It is a determination step, but we'll see if that has any special mechanics. I imagine still a roll off, but who knows? Then select secondary missions after attacker defender selection. And I guess we'll have to see how the tactical secondaries work is going to be the other big question. Being able to hold on to secondaries is interesting. Then you don't get those weird situations where you're like, assassinate, bring it down top of turn 1. You redraw into no prisoners, and you're like, cool, man. Being able to do that and hold on to all of those and then score them all turn 2 or 3. It makes a lot more sense. This is also, it has been noted that there is no limit to the number you can have in hand. So your tactical objectives becomes kind of like a growing tree of branching decisions where you just gain more ways to score secondaries as the game goes on if you don't score them previously. It's not about sort of prescribing your actions at the time, which I think is much better. I also wonder if it means that there won't be as much discarding and redrawing. I kind of hope not, but we'll see. It would be cool if you could discard to try to like mulligan your secondary objectives later on. But I don't know. Wonder if new orders goes away. Yeah, that is an open question for me too. Select secondaries. I think the select secondaries action is or section here is to choose whether or not you choose fixed or tactical objectives. That's in the 10th edition rules as well. Right now, that's the state the point at which you choose tactical or fixed. That was always funny when people like show up at a table and they're like, "Are you playing tactical or fixed?" I'm like, "I don't know. We haven't rolled a tech or defender yet. We're not there." I mean, it's always going to be tactical, but just to be clear, I don't have to tell you that right now. And that's, I think, the point at which you do that. I think it's interesting. Doesn't sound like it's worth to toss secondaries unless you gain command points. Yeah, that would be the reason to discard them. Otherwise, there's literally no reason, right? Because you always have them open to score later on until you've scored your 15 victory points. But this does mean that in some instances, let's say we have done the thing with Death Trap, where we 15'd our turn 1, we scored 4-7, like dropped a bunch of shit in your backline turn 2, scored 15, and then did that again. It seems unlikely that we did all of those, but we'll see. It could be balanced around the terrain layout. It could be that you basically max primary, or at least max primary to a reasonable degree, like to the degree that you can coast out until the end in like 3 rounds. And then round 4 and 5 are all about secondary score and denying your opponent. I don't know if there's as much available for this one. You could score 13 per round, so this one's much slower. You basically takes you 4 turns, or you have to do the end of battle scoring in order to max your primary scores. But yeah, but this makes a lot of sense. There's a universe where you just score a million points turn 1 and then you don't have to do anything for the rest of the game, which would be really good. Wonder if people are just going to stockpile first 2 turns of the secondary system. Well, I think it gives you interesting options because many of these secondaries have kill missions in them that require units to be in specific areas. So you could be like, I drew Sabotage. Let's use a 10th edition example. So I have to go to a terrain feature and complete an action. However, my opponent has trapped that terrain feature. If I move into it, they'll kill me and score 3 victory points, which means I might hold Sabotage for the subsequent turn when I'm going to push my go turn. So it's not necessarily that like I'm like stockpiling for later scoring, but I could purposefully hold back secondaries in order to make my opponent's primary harder to score. The give and take, the push and pull of those decisions is going to be really interesting. So we'll see. There is a cap. They did talk about a cap for secondaries. It's a 15-point cap per battle round, same for secondary missions. But given that most secondaries, at least in 10th edition, who knows what they score now, score like between 3 and I guess like 2 and 5 points. It's at a 15-point per battle round cap. It is unlikely you hit the cap without scoring like at least 3 secondaries, unless the secondaries are just crazy high scoring, which I doubt. It feels to me like the idea is that you have a higher number of, like, you have a higher cap of total secondary points you can score, but I imagine that the idea is that they give you these opportunities to score these big secondary points later in the game, which hopefully smooths over your secondary draws, which I like to see, because that is a big pet peeve of mine when you're like, you look back at a game and you're like, this game was decided by that secondary draw in turn 2, and you're like, damn it, there's nothing I could do about that. But like, I drew a really good secondary in a turn I couldn't score it. But nowadays, in this edition, the hope is that you can claw back those victory points anyway. I'm interested in how this goes. I am cautiously optimistic about this. I like the idea that you can have control over some of your primary objectives. I think the classic adage is, oh my god, we played
At Bonesaurus Reedy 926 donated $10 through Super Chat. The narrative is kind of funny goofy with Death Trap. Since the action completes immediately, it's more like throwing a booby trap at an enemy if they're already on the terrain piece.
Yeah, that's what I misread at the beginning, because I assumed it was like, if you walk into the booby trap and then like you booby trap and then you kill them, that's where you get the victory points. But you're so right that it's like throwing the banana peel in front of the guy who's like chasing you, right? And then he slips over and you're like, I gotcha. It is interesting. It's funny. It's like, and sometimes you have like mines in games and they blow up every time they hit anything, regardless of like which one was moving, and you throw mines at people like grenades. That's what it feels like. That's a classic. That's like a classic like Star Wars Battlefront energy, where you like throw the little anti-personnel like disc mine, and if it just hits stuff, it would blow up. Classic. I 100% agree, though. That's definitely how it feels. I'm cautiously optimistic. As I was saying, I think that giving players control over some of their primary is really cool. I think that the interesting part is that you don't have complete control of all of it. So if you want to say, I've built my entire army around playing Death Trap, and then you never play any opponent with this Force Dispo, you're like, oh, fuck. This sucks. Now, I imagine that if you've built your army to complete disruption primaries, you probably have a lot of similar units, but you can never be 100% sure what your mission's going to be. And I think that's cool. And obviously, you dodge the classic refrain like, oh my god, we played supply drop in round 4 or whatever, and I went second. That was stupid. Because you have control over the missions that you want to see. If you don't want to play a mission, you can just choose a different force disposition where you don't play that mission, which I think is great. Also, on top of that, also having the terrain layout be defined by your primary missions, but not necessarily dictated. Because if you go to an event, what the current scuttlebutt is that with the 3 terrain layouts, let's talk about this in here at some point. With the 3 terrain layouts for each force disposition pairing, you don't know which one you're playing on at any one time.
Bonesaurus Reedy 926 donated $5 through Super Chat. I think the asymmetry also makes it easier to balance. For example, if Purge is too strong into disruption, just adjust the points down a little.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree on that too. And what they said too is that this was, I think, in their live stream or in a Q&A post their live stream. They said that they are open to rebalancing detachments by changing their force dispositions. So if they're like, we have found that Gladius Task Force scores Purge the Foe Force Dispos more easily, we have simply changed it to Disruption. Which in some cases, I don't know, could throw some like wacky, like narrative dissonance in there. But I think it would be very interesting. We're just like, a detachment is too easy to score in a particular force disposition, especially if it's a 3-point detachment. You could just make it so it cannot play that that disposition anymore. If it's a 2 or 1 or 2 point detachment, you could make it so that you require it to be played with other dispositions in order to play that particular style, which limits obviously your list composition when you're building for it. I don't know. I think it's sick. Chance. Making some detachments is more useless if they do it too flippantly. Yeah. But I think that's why they talked quite a bit about wanting to improve the app, the Warhammer app, so that it has scoring inbuilt. I have a sneaking suspicion that part of the incentive for them to do that is, I mean, I'm sure it gives them a lot of great sales data, but also it gives them good balance data. They can watch, they can go through actual game results and see what's happening rather than having to go through third-party services in order to do that. I'm interested, chat. I'm a little worried. I mean, it's a lot of, it's 25 missions, right? And there could be balance issues between the two versions. If you're like, oh, I'm playing Disruption, and the Disruptions are great except for the matchup with Take and Hold, where the Disruption mission is trash and the Take and Hold mission is good, I would be worried that there's like, it does introduce some weird matchup problems. But again, you can just choose a different force dispo, so maybe it's fine. Like, I don't know. As I talked about before, though, in a couple of my other videos, I'm very excited about the fact that if you are playing against, for example, a skew list that runs a particular force disposition, right? I'm playing against Gladius Task Force Space Marines that's like only has 1 or 2 force dispositions available to it, but it's always like 3 Vindicators and 2 Repulsor Executioners. I can choose a different force disposition that forces them into worse missions, which I think is neat. I think there's like a really interesting metagame that could be constructed by that. That's part of the reason that I hope that they, at some point, they come around to making it so that you choose your disposition on the fly rather than having it locked into your list construction. But I imagine that that's probably like a step farther than they want to go in terms of complexity for the very initial release of the system. So I understand why it works like this. All right, chat. Just like 10th edition, we're going to be playing this for a year to iron out the bugs. Yeah, that happens every edition. Get ready for at least 6 months of the game being a disaster fire, and then we'll have good gameplay after that. Force dispositions will be locked when you submit your list. Yes, for tournaments, they have noted that it was in this article, and then I moused away from it, and I don't know where they said it. But for tournaments, your force disposition is locked in. Yeah. In a tournament setting, you'll lock in your force disposition for the event where you submit their list. For pickup games, you can choose different force dispositions ahead of each battle. For tournaments, it's locked in for the entire edition, or for the entire thing. Anyway, chat. Like for tournament play, if you had access to 2 force dispositions, you'd have more control. Yeah, because you're never going to have more than probably 3, right? Like I imagine most of the 1 point detachments are 1 force dispo, and then maybe the 3 point detachments are probably 2, like one or another. It would be surprising to me if you ever had like a ton of control over your force disposition. So like 2-ish probably is average. And it would be interesting if like you narrowed down those selections. And honestly, a lot of them may have overlap. So you're like, the detachments I chose, like they can all either be take and hold, and then I have like 1 or 2 other options in there. And then you can look at your opponents and you can determine which mission you would like to play. I think would be cool. And then if that was like a secret decision at the beginning of the game. But I understand too that like 40k's, like, you know, miniature games as a whole are open information games, and they probably should always be open information games. And so incorporating secret information has never gone well. We've seen a lot of it with like secret missions and all these things that they tried in 9th and 10th edition, and they didn't really work. And so I don't know. Having less hidden information maybe is okay. If you're like grab your forced disposition card or whatever, and you like hold it under the table, and then you have to like reveal at the same time, that could get gamey, which I understand they would maybe want to hop out. All right, chat. I think that's all that I have to talk about today. There was a little bit of information about new Armageddon, which is like kind of fun, or new Apocalypse, excuse me. New Apocalypse rules, which I think is kind of interesting. They give you like these super stratagems, which is kind of sweet. Apocalypse isn't necessarily my jam, but I appreciate that it's finally getting actual rules. One thing that has been always weird to me is that they include rules for units that are like 2,500, 3,000 points or whatever. You know, you could play Warlord Titans at $4,000. But there's no actual rules framework for playing a game of that size. They're like, play Onslaught, that's 3,000 points, and then you're still left with all this like this just smorgasbord of units you can't play. Being able to push to 30,000 points, I think, I don't know, it helps a little bit. It's fun. I don't know. It's fun stuff. I like that you can pay 4 command points to WOG every turn. As an orc player, just dump all your command points into WOGing. Pretty fun. All right, chat. Well, that is Secret Wargaming of Vortex Rain. Surprise! you've been sucked into a black hole. That's all I got to talk about. I'm kind of hype for these missions. I think they're pretty cool. I certainly think there's definitely the case that they could be wildly unbalanced. And hopefully they're on the ball with rules revisions. If they drop them in one missions, just like score 15 points every turn automatically, I hope they just fix it before the edition releases. Because it sounds like we're going to get a lot of this stuff. And last edition, they did nerf Blackspear Task Force before it was printed. So they're open to the discussion for sure. All right, Chance. I am going to go ahead and hop off. Thanks everyone for coming and hanging out with me. I should be live next Monday, either with a Monday Mayhem, or we'll talk about some new edition stuff that we get to hop into, which I'm very excited about. So these streams have been great. You all have been great as well. And if you have not yet, I will post a link real quick to my video that I released this morning, because it has a lot of the information that I discussed today in it. It is here. Here you go. You can hop into that one and yeah, watch that video for some more leaks and reveals about the new 11th edition. Thanks everyone for chilling. The nerfed Imperial Knights and Millisecond before it came out. Yeah, that one was big too. Although not Death Guard. God damn it. I was talking to it was really funny. I was talking to a tournament organizer because I was live streaming their event, and they were like, "Man, we expected to see more people for the 40K event. Like normally we have a lot of signups, but like a lot of people dropped last minute." And I was like, "Yeah." The event got won by Death Guard, and it was like, "Well, it's because the Death Guard Codex came out, and it's like super toxic, and the final round is always Death Guard." Could have nerfed that one, guys. All right, chat. I'm gonna hop off. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for watching. Keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming. And I'll see you in the next one. Good night.